After GB News contributors decided to stand with Donald Trump with his plans to implement tariffs against the UK, Richard Littlejohn from the Daily Mail went even further. Trump should raise his sights from Greenland and buy Britain instead. I'd take him, warts and all, over our hopeless, complete and utter lawyer of a PM any day. Yes, you read that right. A British columnist is calling for the president of the US to take over the UK. Within the article, he said this: "Back when Trump first mooted the idea of buying Greenland, I wrote here, only partly in jest, that he should raise his sights and buy Britain instead. The more I think about it, the more I warm to the idea. We'd immediately become the largest state in the Union, with the population of New York and California combined, and would gain the political influence which came with that." I mean, that is a wild thing to say. We're going to go more into the article in a second, but that first bit is absolutely insane. First of all, you hear what he's saying. We can be, or will be, the largest state of America. He's arguing to give up our national sovereignty. He's saying we shouldn't be a country anymore. We should be a state of America. These people who, by the way, we'll talk about Brexit in a second too. He supports Brexit. And one of the good arguments to leave, I mean, I'll vote Remain, but one of the good arguments to leave the European Union was for sovereignty, because there's anti-democratic forces within the EU. And you've got these right-wing people writing in the Daily Mail and saying stuff like, well, we need to leave the EU because we need our national sovereignty. And then is literally saying, actually, we shouldn't even be a country. We should just be a state and be subordinates to America. It's absolutely insane how these bootlickers operate. Now, Littlejohn continues and claims Greenlanders will be better off under US control. Under the American flag, the 56,000 residents of Greenland would continue to enjoy as much autonomy as they do under Danish jurisdiction. Like any other US state, they'd certainly have more control over their own affairs than we did inside the EU. I seriously doubt that, giving up their sovereignty to a country that doesn't even guarantee healthcare. All the current benefits Greenlanders receive will be gone. Then he brings up Brexit. When 17.4 million people voted for Brexit, he spent 4 years trying to overturn the result of the referendum. Now he's in Downing Street with the support of just 1 in 5 of those entitled to vote. He's deliberately unravelling the Brexit settlement by stealth without any mandate. Now, this is true. Keir Starmer, he didn't respect the results of the referendum, but that was about undermining, Labour under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. It's not through any sort of ideological bent or even principled reasoning for this. He knew that it was going to be direct opposition to Jeremy Corbyn, sort of let's stay out of the EU and trying to fight sort of the membership and the People's Vote campaign. So it was about disrupting that. It's also, again, incredibly ironic that Littlejohn talks about Brexit when he's happy for the US to give up sovereignty, or for us to give up sovereignty to the US. Now, finally, Littlejohn pivots to the so-called sharp mind of Trump. You may consider him a thin-skinned megalomaniac, but as Robert Hardman observed in Saturday's Mail after his brilliant up-and-close and personal audience with Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, he's far from the madman his critics maintain. Nor is this 79-year-old Trump away with the fairies, Biden-style, another allegation gathering momentum on the left. As Hardman reports, the Donald is as sharp as a tack, in full possession of his faculties and with the stamina of a man half his age. Oh, really? I'm sorry, but this is major cope. I've been trying to pretend that Trump's cognitive abilities haven't been on the decline. I mean, we've all witnessed it. We've seen it, right? You don't need to be a doctor to know this. However, TikTok creator and doctor, Epistemic Crisis, has been documenting his mental decline.
Here's the President of the United States displaying classic frontotemporal dementia, that forward-leaning posture that he seems to have had for several years now. I'm a physical therapist with a doctorate in my field and 14 years experience working in home healthcare, treating geriatric patients with dementia, just like this guy. Here's another more clear example. You see the example figure up top, and then Trump during a press conference. I mean, it's basically identical. And this leaning forward posture actually differentiates frontotemporal dementia from Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's involves basically forgetting, while FTD includes confabulation, where the holes in your memory, you fill them in with lies that you make up and that you 100% believe. This explains why Trump always seems 100% confident, even though he's a fucking liar. Many of you have been asking me, what is the cause of expiration for somebody with frontotemporal dementia? And the answer is pneumonia, related to aspirating food. Because over time, as the frontal and temporal lobes atrophy, you lose the ability to effectively swallow, and then you aspirate food and develop pneumonia. I've said it before and I'll say it again. With all of these dementia symptoms piling up and his possible history of stroke, TIA, heart failure, chronic kidney disease, I say he's got 2 to 4 months left in the land of the living, or as somebody who could possibly fulfill the duties of the president. A lot of people are asking, well, can't they just prop him up for the entire 4 years? The answer is no, because the more the frontal lobe atrophies, he's going to start to do stuff that is so embarrassing, it will be impossible for him to remain president, no matter how much MAGA wants him to be. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Barry, I want to ask you, what do you make of this phenomenon of people on the right wing who are the loudest to claim they are patriots, yet they are exposing, quite frankly, treacherous behaviour?
You absolutely nailed it. It's utter madness. By the way, Richard Littlejohn, what a throwback. That guy used to be all over the screens. I guess now he's, got his feet up at the Daily Mail, just churning out reactionary columns every week. So good for him. But no, it's complete insanity. I mean, we've seen people on the right before in this country saying, I would like Donald Trump to be president. I would like Donald Trump to come over and sort things out here. But Littlejohn, as you said, just said that he would be happy. And he said that he wasn't joking, that he would be happy for the UK to give up its sovereignty, to not be a nation anymore, and not even a vassal state, but a state of the US. I mean, it's completely barmy. And you cannot square being a so-called patriot with wanting to become part of the United States instead of a nation. You cannot square about those things. They do not fit together. And similarly for the people who said that they want Trump to be involved in British governance in any way, on the far right. Again, they cannot square their patriotism with this. Also, see the BBC. Right, I'm no big fan of the BBC. I've criticized them constantly for the last for the last 2 or more years of the Gaza war. But we saw this with Trump's threat to sue the BBC, to take the BBC down, and people on the right, not just the far right, people on kind of the center right, cheering him on, saying, "Yeah, do it, destroy the BBC." Again, that is not patriotic. You cannot square those two things. And I just don't know if they don't seem to understand the inherent contradiction in what they're saying. Like, beyond it being a comprehension, it's being a contradiction. It's completely insane, Curtis. It's completely mad.
Just to pick up on your point, because it's really interesting there how you were saying it's not just the right, it's the centre right. And I think that's a good point, because I think when it comes to the far right, I'm not really surprised about this. I'm not surprised that GB News is taking a pro-Trump stance over Britain, because at the end of the day, I mean, all media is, all corporate media is oligarch media, right? But GB News is the most obvious example. So for them, it's not about principle or ideas. It's about, well, Trump represents the oligarchy. We like him. That's it. I get that. And that doesn't surprise me. But people writing in the Telegraph, in the Daily Mail, who, conservatives who have been around for a very, very long time, are also echoing the same sentiment. And the one thing about conservatives, which has been lost in their ideology or in their community, is the support for institutions. I think that was something conservatism has always been about the great British institutions. These should be defended. And even something like the BBC, in which both the left and right have criticisms of. I think you're absolutely right to point out BBC, by the way, as an example of the right-wing attack in the BBC. And it's very strange to see that. I mean, you've got people almost desecrating over Churchill's legacy of, we'll ignore the racist legacy and the fascist, and then the famine legacy for a second. But in terms of the European human rights, the European Court of Human Rights, for example, and all these sort of European institutions we built together to make sure we don't sort of have conflicts. modern conservatives and right wingers no longer believe in that. And I find that very fascinating that it's even leaking into the so called mainstream conservatism.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think that I first started to hear these kinds of things when people would go and interview marchers on like the Unite the Right rally, or protests outside the hotels in Epping. You know, you would hear people, participants there, talking about how we want Trump to come in and sort this mess, and Britain will be better under Trump, and it seemed like complete fringe nonsense, and something that you would just kind of laugh at almost. You know, the clips would go viral because people thought that they were sort of funny and pathetic. And now you've seen it encroach into, I would say, mainstream conservatism, which, as you say, is completely bizarre. Because again, when you come back to the contradiction that I see in that, where how can you be a patriot when you want to prostrate yourself before the president of another country? The Conservative Party and the Conservative movement has always been has always traded on patriotism and nationalism and the great defenders of British values, you know, whatever their idea of British values are. You know, and before the kind of the flag shagging and, you know, roundabout painting, they did always include the sort of the Union Jack in their public facing materials, right? And so to see them, the thing is, it doesn't feel like an attack on Stammer or Labour. It feels like an attack on the nation state. That's honestly how I see it.